tonight for my presentation on the DeGroot family stories, preserving our heritage. This presentation is not about me. I am not an author or a speaker. This book contains family stories, stories about Peru, told to me by my father. This is my dad. Also, his sister-in-law, Eileen, and his cousin, Adeline DeGroot Capello. At the time I recorded these, they were all in their 80s. And now I am in my 80s, so I'm going to probably be looking at my notes quite a bit. I learned many things doing their stories. Some of the stories I had heard in the past, but there was no way I could relate them with any accuracy. Other stories were new to me, like how Mom and Dad met. They have all passed away now, but I cannot begin to tell you how much I enjoyed listening to them, hearing their family stories and stories about Peru. I marvel at all the hardships that they had to endure, and I saw the strength of character that resulted from them. For over 50 years, I hiked with my dad every week. As we walked, Dad would tell me family stories. He told me about my great-grandparents, Peter and Lucetta DeGroot, coming to Peru from Holland in 1881. They were both 30 years old at the time, and they had four children with them, all under the age of 4. They bought a building at 1621 Water Street. This is my great-grandparents, and this was in front of their building. On the first floor, they had a fish market where they sold fish and fishing equipment. They lived on the second floor. They owned a horse and wagon. They would put their fish in the wagon, cover them with willows so the sun wouldn't be on them, and they would go around Peru selling fish. Dad says, back in the day, Pulaski Street was called area between the bridges. This is another picture of Water Street. The National Sheet Metal owned buildings on both sides of my great-grandfather. They had to move heavy racks of coil, and they had to push it down a slight ramp in the sidewalk to the street and across in front of Grandpa's, and then back up the ramp into their second building. The National Sheet Metal wanted to buy Great-Grandpa's building, and so eventually they traded my great-grandfather a building 1 block away at 1700 block. This is a picture of the 3-story building, and their part was on the left side. On the first floor, they had their fish market again, and they lived on the second floor. Then in the basement, they had hundreds. There they are sitting in front of, if you notice the painted sign in the window, and here's another one. In the basement, they had hundreds of barrels of wine that my great-grandfather made. There is a picture of their son, Leonard. This is in front of the Del Rio Tavern. After the fish market closed down, they opened up this tavern called Del Rio, which Dad said meant the river. And you will notice on the window, it says free fish, Friday and Saturday nights. During the Depression, on the third floor, they operated a speakeasy. Many years later, this building was owned by Friday's Tavern. And this is what it looked like after it was abandoned, sitting empty before they tore it down. Oh, probably maybe 10 years ago or so. Years later, Uncle Leonard bought the building on the corner of Water Street and Putnam Street. It is now the Red Door. And at that time, the door into the DeGroot Tavern was on the corner. And here is a picture of Uncle Leonard. He is the second one on the right. And if you look closely, he's got ice skates on. They used to ice skate at the slough on the south side of the river. There are 2 newspaper articles that show Uncle Leonard ice skating. One when he was 72 years old in 1951, and one when he was 82 years old in 1961. Adeline told me that her parents and the family lived with their grandparents, Peter and Lucetta, when they needed someone there to take care of them. Adeline started working in the fish market when she was 14 years old. She loved to draw, and she used to enter different contests and had many pictures where she won money. Of course, back then $1 was a lot of money. Adeline was asked by the wife of Peru's brewmaster for the Star Union Brewery. They wanted her to paint a picture on the label for Pilsner Logan beer. It was a lion with a paw on a ball. She had no idea what to charge them, so she charged them $5. Later, she was told she should have charged them $1.50, but it was too late. She said that for 15 years, she would see this beer bottle with her label on it. And they told me that at the time, the hill by the brewery was called the Brewery Hill. Don't know what it's called now, but even in my day, it was the Brewery Hill. Dad told stories about the Peru swing bridge, which both sets of his grandparents ran. The paternal grandparents, Peter and Lucetta DeGroot, and the maternal grandparents, Henry and Louisa Meyer. Now, when Henry and Louisa were the bridge tenders, they lived in the bridge tenders' home south of the bridge. The bridge crossed the river at Putnam and Water Street. The bridge was built in 1870, and it was taken down in the 1950s. Dad said at that time Putnam Street was called Town Hill because things were just starting to move up to 4th Street. When a boat came up the river, they would blow their horn so the bridge tenders would know that they had to turn the bridge. Here's a picture of Louisa and Henry, that should say Meyer, turning the turnstile. And now you can see how they rotated the bridge using this. And here's a picture of them with several of their children by the turnstile. And this is them in later years. And one day when we were up to the Utica Lock and Dam, the turnstile is on display there, which I thought was pretty neat. Dad said that it took 4 people to turn the bridge. Anyone that was in the vicinity, when they heard the horn of the boat, they would all go and help turn the bridge. Even Adeline told me that she helped turn the bridge. My great-grandfather, Peter, went back to Howland several different times. In 1903, he brought back with him his brother Nick and Nick's wife Anna. He also brought back his sister's Margaret's son, Henry Belink. While Henry Belink was in Peru, he lived with my grandparents, John and Lucy DeGroot. They lived on Brewster Street. Henry would walk 1 block south to Water Street, where he would sit and paint pictures of Peru's Swing Bridge. One picture was 4 foot by 6 foot, and then there were several smaller pictures. The larger picture hung in one of the DeGroot caverns for years, and one of the smaller ones hung in my Grandpa John's living room. Years later, the people that were running the cavern gave the large picture to Uncle Pete. This was Dad's brother. There's the bridge that he painted. Years later, I read that, when Uncle Pete came, years later, the large picture was given to Uncle Pete. When Uncle Pete went into the service during World War II, the large painting was loaned to the Peru City Hall to display on their wall. When Uncle Pete came home from the service, he went to City Hall to get the picture. He was told it was not there, and they did not know where it went. And to this day, we do not know where it is. Later, Henry Belink moved to New Mexico, where he became a famous painter. If you go on the internet and look up Henry Belink, you will see he painted pictures of Oklahoma's Indian chiefs. And he was commissioned to paint pictures of 63 different Indian tribes. This is just 3 of the many pictures that we have. After World War II, he advised Dwight Eisenhower on his beginning painting efforts. This is a picture of Henry with his daughter, Margaret. And this is a picture of the bridge coming down in the 1950s. I actually don't remember that. This is a picture of my Grandpa John DeGroot when he was a young man. And during Prohibition, gangsters from Chicago heard that my grandfather, John DeGroot, made homemade wine. They came to Peru to see if Grandpa could supply them with wine. Grandpa told them he only made enough for family and friends. While down here, they found out that Grandpa owned duck hunting grounds at the slough. The men would come down to Peru and Grandpa would take them duck hunting. One time they came back empty-handed, no ducks. Grandpa took them to one of the taverns on Water Street. Grandpa walked that 1 block home to Brewster Street where he had live ducks. Grandpa grabbed ducks from the house, took them back down to the tavern. Behind the tavern was a tall stone wall. Grandpa let the ducks go. The gangsters shot the ducks. And if you go down by the red door and where Grandpa's building was, you will see that tall wall. It's still there. Grandpa took the ducks back home, and my dad and Grandma cleaned the ducks for 25 cents each. In the book, there are over 415 family stories and stories about Peru, and there are over 90 rescue and body recovery stories. There are also newspaper articles about the DeGroot that the DeGroot family participated in. There's Grandpa with his ducks. There's my grandpa, my Uncle Pete, my dad, Paul DeGroot, and my Uncle Percy, the 3 sons and Grandpa. I contacted the LaSalle News Tribune and was given permission to use their newspaper articles. In 1949, after many years of river rescue and body recovery, the family helped start the Peru River Rescue Station. In 1951, my grandfather, John DeGroot, patented a drag. This drag was used for dragging the river and recovering bodies. Oops, I don't know what I did wrong. This here article says there was 224 bodies recovered from 1900 to 1957. I was told recently from somebody that's in the river rescue station that they are still using Grandpa's drag. After years of listening to my dad's stories, I read a letter that was written to Dr. James Dotson. My grandmother wrote, "I am a grandmother who is blessed to have many grandchildren. I often take care of them and love having them over. However, I would like to do more than just babysit. What can I do to make an impact on their lives?" Dr. Dotson answered, "Grandparents can have a powerful influence on their grandchildren if they will take the time to invest in their lives. There is so much to be accomplished while they are young. One great contribution you can make to preserve this is to preserve your heritage by describing your family stories and acquainting them with their ancestors." He went on to say, River Rescue, he went on to say, which really meant a lot to me, an African folk song says, "When an old person dies, it is like a library that has burned down." And I know by listening to my dad and Eileen, Adeline, and other people I met through doing the book, old people like to talk, and they just want you to listen. There is a richness of history in your memory of earlier days that will be lost if it is not passed down to the next generation. The stories of your past and your childhood can be treasures to your grandchildren. Unless you share these experiences, that part of their history will be gone forever. After reading this article, I decided to preserve the DeGroot family stories. In 2002, I would take a tape recorder along when Dad and I were hiking, and I would tape the stories. I also taped Aunt Eileen and Adeline's stories. When I got home, I copied their stories onto my computer, and later I printed them and put them in a binder. I taught myself how to type, and I wrote their stories using their words and expressions, so I would not be changing their words. I also tried to put a picture with the stories to make it more interesting. I made these homemade books for my dad, my two sisters, Adeline, and myself. They were definitely a labor of love. My dad was 85 years old at the time. In 2012, my sister Janet's grandson, Jackson Funnison, wanted to do his school history fair project on the Peru River Rescue Station. We went to Utica to the Historical Society to see if they had any information that we could use. We were disappointed to find out they didn't have any information on the River Rescue Station. My sister Janet told them about the book I had done. They asked if we could bring the books up to Utica for them to look at. We took our books up there, and three of them sat reading the books. After a while, we told them we were going for lunch and we would be back. When we went back, they were still reading the books. They encouraged me to have them published. They even gave me the name of a publisher. Jackson did his school history fair project using my homemade book and pictures. He received a 102.5 out of 103. My dad had some pieces of walnut from the old Peru bank that had been on Water Street. Years after the bank had closed and it was sitting empty, Dad and his friends would go inside and play. Dad saw the pieces of walnut lying around and he took several pieces home. When Mom and Dad were engaged, he made her a beautiful hanky box. Dad also made Mom a Catholic crucifix with Jesus carved in such detail. It was simply awesome. My one sister, Paula, has the hanky box, and my other sister, Janet, has the crucifix. With some of the larger pieces, Dad made a chest for Mom to store blankets in. In 1973, I asked my dad to carve me a picture of a buffalo for Lamoille's first Buffalo Days. So I can always remember what year Buffalo Days was because I've got my carving up on the wall. Later, he got a telephone pole and he carved himself a totem pole and an eagle. Over the years, we all went hunting for arrowheads. I remember in the spring, especially when the dirt was just turned over, you could find some. Dad is holding my very favorite piece. It is a bird. Dad had it on display at a showing, and overnight it was stolen. Every spring, we also went hiking looking for morels and watercress. We used to find fresh watercress at Split Rock in the creek. We called this a meal fit for a king. In 2014, I had my book published. They were for my children, grandchildren, family, and friends. I did a presentation at the Peru Library, and there was enough interest. I had more books published. Since 2014, I have had people ask if I have had any books left to sell, which I did not. So this summer, I had more published. The book was written so we do not forget our family that came before us and to pass down stories of our ancestors, of our family legacy, and stories about Peru. Dad passed away Christmas Day, 2009, at the age of 92. But I know Dad, Aunt Eileen, Adeline would be so proud to know that their stories will be passed down to future generations. This is a picture of my Uncle Pete and his friend Jim Zimmerman boat that they had for when they did river rescue. And this is Uncle Pete, Uncle Percy, and Jim in a homemade diving suit. And this is a neighbor and good friend of ours, Liz Sittler. She lived right in our backyard, and it is where the Sittler boarding house used to sit, kitty corner from Royal Auto, which they now have torn down, and it is a parking lot. A nice parking lot, but a parking lot. When it was a boarding house, it was very unique. They had a humongous kitchen and a humongous pantry, and a living room large enough to be like 2-3 living rooms. And in between the two was a hallway. And if you took the hallway down to the end, on the left side, there was a bathroom with just a toilet and a basin. And across the hallway was a bathtub. It's the only one I've ever seen quite like that. And that had to have been when they had roomers. This is a picture of the South Shore Boat Club when it was actually on the south side of the river. This was before they moved it to the north side of the river, or built on the north side, but they still kept the name, South Shore Boat Club. And this is just a closing picture of the Peru Swing Bridge. I would like to thank you all for being here and listening to me reminisce about my dad's stories, and Eileen and Adeline's stories, and stories about Peru. And I will close by saying, share your stories. Share your heritage with your children and your grandchildren.